For decades, buying a home has been seen as the ultimate financial goal, but here in 2025, with the average sold price across Canada still sitting at above $664,000, the question is it still worth it? The traditional advice has always been that buying is the ultimate goal, renting is throwing money away. But in 2025, with home prices and interest rates where they are, that conversation is a whole lot more nuanced. So by the end of this video, I hope you'll have a clear picture of whether renting or buying makes sense for you, while I throw in some tidbits of info about my experience now being a homeowner for over 5 years. When I first moved out of my parents' house, I rented 2 different apartments, a shoebox in Montreal and a 2-bedroom close to where I'm at now. And then eventually, as I got interested in real estate investing, I actually bought a 100-year-old duplex, lived in one unit and rented out the other, which is a concept known as house hacking. Yes, the rent from the other unit did cover a substantial chunk of my monthly housing costs, but I quickly realized that living side by side with my tenants wasn't necessarily right for me. It's a good idea on paper and it was a great first taste of real estate investing, but lifestyle wise, not the right fit. Fast forward a year from then and I bought the single family home that I'm still in today. But I will say that my views on home ownership overall have, let's just call it, matured a little bit. I say this because a few years ago, I would have told you that buying is always the right move. And the reason I would say that is because for me, well, at the time, in my version of life, it was the right move and ultimately did make me a good chunk of change throughout the appreciation that the market experienced since, which was not something anyone could have predicted, myself included. That being said, now if you were to ask me that same question, I answer that I think it depends on your lifestyle, financial and family goals, and more importantly, your budget. Because with where prices are at in 2025, buying simply isn't always the right move to make. So here's where people can often trip up a bit. They compare rent to just the mortgage payment and can quickly come to the conclusion that buying could potentially be cheaper month to month. But seriously, that's not reality in all cases. Owning comes with property taxes, insurance, utilities, repairs, and ongoing maintenance as well, all of which I've personally averaged over $10,000 a year on my own home between fixing things up and improving the property. And that's not even counting capital costs and expenses like changing the roof, the windows, and other large things that I've done since. And that's a lot of money that could otherwise have been invested in other asset classes. Even say the S&P 500 alone, that's averaged 14.75% returns annually over the past 5 years, would have returned me roughly 17 grand in interest. And what I've learned the most about buying a home is that it's not just the financial costs. We often just put all of this into spreadsheets and try to make the most mathematically sound decision. That is what I tend to usually do. But when it comes to housing, seriously, that is not always the only factor to consider. There is a great psychological cost to owning a home as well that's often overlooked, at least in finance videos. Being the one that's responsible for every leaky pipe, a broken furnace, cutting the grass, snow blowing your entrance, repairing roof leaks, these all take a lot of time and energy out of your day that not everyone wants to do, at least maybe not in your 20s. So I'm not saying that owning a home isn't worth it because of those factors. In general, I actually do think it is worth it over time as a place of residence that also has the potential advantage to appreciate and grow your net worth. It has been for me, but there is definitely more to the equation that needs to be considered. And sometimes I think back to how simple it was to rent. Meanwhile, in many major cities across Canada and the US, rents have actually been softening lately. So, depending on where you live, renting and investing, the difference in your TFSA or FHSA might actually put you ahead on a monthly basis, depending on your investment returns, and more importantly, your discipline to actually stick to a plan that could make up for that spread. Always consider that a sizable down payment is frozen equity pretty much forever until you sell the property down the line. So a $150,000 down payment is a very sizable chunk of money to save up to in the first place. And then from there, that's thousands of dollars in interest and growth that you are going to be forsaking on that capital that would otherwise be invested elsewhere. Again, there's really no one size fits all situation here, but these are just all things to consider. Now again, don't get me wrong, I'm not anti-ownership in the slightest. I own my home. I just think that with where prices are at, it is a much bigger decision with more variables to take into consideration today than 5 or even 10 years ago. Here are the trade-offs, starting with the pros. First off, for savings, right? Paying down a mortgage quietly builds wealth in the background. For me, that's been the single best tool of home ownership, that I was able to lock in a 1.8% interest rate 5 years ago for 5 years, though it'll be much higher on renewal in January. Second, long-term stability. No one's, kicking you out at the end of a lease or trying to increase your lease payment because renovations were done to another unit in the building. So that is definitely something that I have enjoyed, having control over my property. 3, potential appreciation as well. If prices do rise, you gain equity, but now I wouldn't count on equity appreciation more than a couple percent a year again, which is more normal anyways. The years of 10-15% increases like we saw over the past couple of years, especially during the pandemic, I don't think we'll be seeing anytime soon. Now, being a homeowner for 5 years now, there are definitely a couple downsides as well. Number one, there is a very high entry cost. Down payment, closing costs, legal fees, and moving costs, which are all a lot of money, especially when combined, that could otherwise be invested. It's something to take into account. Number two, there is ongoing maintenance. That'll easily be thousands of dollars per year, even if you buy a newer home. So you need to have an additional buffer of savings in your monthly budget to account for this, or at least have a large nest egg that you can dip into when something arises. And then 3, lack of flexibility. It's much harder and more expensive to sell a house than to walk away from a lease. I've seen houses on my street, for example, sell in a couple of days, and then others are sitting on the market with a realtor sign out front for months. The point being, property is very illiquid and expensive to transact as well. And we all need to consider that luck also plays a huge role here. I bought my home for much less than it is worth today, and I couldn't have predicted that in any way, shape, or form. And honestly, I probably couldn't comfortably even afford this same house today if I had to go out and buy it today. So let me quickly give you some real numbers here. My monthly mortgage on this property is under $1,500, but if I were to buy this exact same house today at its current market value at around $625,000 with a 20% down payment, well, my mortgage alone in that case would be over $2,500, and that's considering a 3.5% interest rate. Add in property taxes, insurance, and utilities, and now you're closer to $3,000 a month, with only $1,000 a month in principal being paid down. And here's the kicker for new buyers. Lenders unfortunately don't care if you're already paying that high amount in rent. They only care about your debt to income ratio and stability of a high enough income. So, oftentimes without 2 income sources or a cosigner, qualifying for a $400,000 or $500,000 mortgage today can be a serious challenge. And that's unfortunately the reality a lot of buyers are up against right now, especially in markets like Ottawa, Toronto, and Vancouver, among others, where prices do remain extremely high. Though unfortunately, I don't see things getting much better in the foreseeable future. Even though I don't think we'll see massive appreciation in a short period of time, I also don't see prices coming down dramatically. So look, if you're still really adamant on purchasing a home, which I do totally understand, here would be my recommendations. Number one, and this is a given, only buy within your means. Being house poor is brutal. Unlike a car, for example, you make a bad decision buying a new car, you can sell that quickly, right? A house can take months to sell and cost big money if you make a mistake and you're underwater on it. For example, a house down on my street sold for $625,000 a couple years ago. And I don't know the full details of what ended up happening, but the people who purchased the home were in it for about a year. Maybe they got relocated for work, I'm not sure, and they paid for that difference. But the point being, within a year, they had to sell it and it sold for $575,000. So right off the bat, $50K loss, and that's not taking into account transaction fees as well as the broker's fee. So that could be a $75,000 loss or more just by making a mistake, buying a house that's too expensive. And number two, think long term, okay? Buying only makes sense if you plan to stay put for, I would say, at least 5 years. Otherwise, again, transaction costs just eat away any gains. 3, consider sweat equity. The best opportunities today are often in undervalued homes that need work. That was the case for my house, where you can essentially force appreciate it like I did with many of my properties, both my rental properties as well as this house right here. Putting in that time and sweat equity to make a spread on what you put in and what it is worth after. Number 4, max out your registered accounts. Use the FHSA, use the TFSA to build your down payment fund. They give you tax advantages while you save. And 5, don't be afraid of a smaller down payment, okay? I bought my house with just 5% down. Yes, it does come with extra costs, but truth be told, had I waited to save up 20%, I wouldn't have been able to buy it at all, seriously. But if you do put 5% down, keep in mind that staying put for a while is even more important to offset the extra costs associated with mortgage insurance, as well as the tax paid on that mortgage insurance. So really, is buying a house still worth it in 2025? The answer is, well, of course it depends. For some, home ownership does bring stability, it brings forced savings and long-term wealth. For others though, renting plus investing is the smarter move, especially if you're not sure where you're going to be setting down roots in the next 5 years. At the end of the day though, it is really not about following outdated advice, it's about what makes sense for you financially and personally. Hey, if you found this breakdown helpful, please consider dropping a like and subscribe for more videos like this one. And also check out the links down below in my video's description and pinned comment for resources that I use and recommend, like my free Skillshare course on stock market investing, has over 3,000 students, 7 hours of content, 100% for free on a 1-month trial. So thanks a lot for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.